Hi and welcome back to ABG Investor Days. My name is Simon Johnson and I'm an analyst here at ABG covering IT and gaming. Next up, I have the pleasure of welcoming Jacob and Jacob from the esport company Astralis. With that said, I'll leave the floor to you guys.
Thank you very much, and a pleasure to be here today. We've been given 20 minutes to talk about our company, Astralis, which is an esports company, as you said correctly. We'll try to sort of cover it best possible, but 20 minutes is not a long time to talk about a company in an industry that not a lot of people know a lot about. So today we will try to sort of cover the basics and some of the parameters of how we're working, how we're structured, where do we actually make money, and what are some of the perspectives that we see on the future. So for understanding, we will start out by looking at the company structure, because we actually get a lot of questions about sort of the structure of the company and how things are working. So we have Astralis AS, which is the publicly listed company. Under that, we have Astralis Management, which runs sort of the daily operations of all our individual esports teams. And under that, every single team has its own entity, which helps us obviously keeping track of the books and making sure that everything is accumulated in the right way possible. Furthermore, we have made our first acquisition externally, which is Pixel TV, which is a web and TV-based platform that covers gaming and tech in general, allowing us to tap a little bit more into the broader audience. Yeah, you can feel free to jump to the next slide. Great. So our organization, as those of you who know us know, but if you don't know us, then you don't know, we did a management buyout of the company in 2019 prior to listing it publicly. We were formerly a company called Refresh Entertainment that owned another part of an esport company, Blast Premier, as well. At that point, we were 10 employees in our HQ, alongside a couple of players and a couple of teams. And until today, where we are over 35 employees in our HQ, and we are over 85 employees in total. That includes coaches, that includes technical staff, talent academy players, etc., etc. Furthermore, we have also built a physical structure where we are standing here today, which is called Astralis Nexus. It's a 1,400 square meter facility right next to the entrance of Tivoli, the legendary Tivoli Gardens in Copenhagen. Which is basically a shop, an entertainment center, and a place to enjoy gaming in all varieties, but also go to a specific event, meet our players, see our trophies, and we're also the facilitator of external events. Also, we have added Astralis Us Inc. So when we started out, we were primarily a North European-based organization. We now have an office in Las Vegas in the US, where we are running our newest team expansion, which is Rainbow Six, an acquisition that we made in the summer of 2021. So we are growing quite rapidly, and we've also managed to build a very, very strong and durable organization. And I think when you look at us compared to a lot of the other esport teams and other esport organizations, we are built from a structural perspective much more like a classical entertainment and sports entity. And most of the people that we have hired in key positions are people with long-standing experience from the outside world, bringing experience from either football clubs, from entertainment industry, from tech startups, etc., and sort of bringing it all together, requiring and building what is now Astralis. Great, you can jump to the next slide. So what we're mostly known for is obviously our teams. For a good sake, Astralis is sort of structured in a similar way to what a sports club is. And when we talk about esports, that is the term electronic sports, which is sports being played on a computer. So when we say we are an esport team, that's sort of saying you're a sports team. That doesn't necessarily narrow you down to being a specific sport or esport. In the same way it works for us, where there are multiple different genres of esports, in the same way that there's football, there's basketball, there's handball. And we are working specifically within Counter-Strike, League of Legends, Rainbow Six, and Fortnite. And each of these teams have either a different sort of geographic location. Some of them are working outside of our HQ and are catering to different audiences. So here in the Nordics, we are obviously primarily known for Counter-Strike. Astralis has had the most dominant run over the last 5 years in Counter-Strike history. We have spent over 120 weeks as the #1 team in the world, which is completely unparalleled of all other teams. We have won 4 majors, which are the equivalent in Counter-Strike of the world championships, and we've actually won 3 of them in a row. So we've been having quite a good years and successful tournament runs. More than that, that is the base that we've built the rest of Astralis upon. That is where we revolutionized the sports performance metrics. That's where we started bringing in psychiatrists, support systems around them. And it's also where we are building an integral part of the ecosystem for the future, which are franchise leagues. This is something that I'll jump a little bit more into when we speak about the next game, which is League of Legends. League of Legends is not quite as old of a game as Counter-Strike, but it is similarly played 5-on-5. It is a game that is very, very big from a global perspective. It is the biggest esport in the world, but it is also a game that is very, very heavily tied to the Asian part of the world, specifically China and Korea, that has a long history of success in this game. To give you perspective of the size of League of Legends, there was a World Finals in 2019 played in Shanghai, where there was over 78,000 people in the audience, and the viewership that was accumulated at around the same space of a Super Bowl. So this is not some niche sport. This is not some small thing. On the global scale, it is up there with the biggest of the biggest. So our League of Legends team also played what is a franchise league, and franchise league is a structure that is similar to the US-based sports. That means it is a league where you buy a spot in a league or you are part of the foundation of the league. And then there is no relegation and no promotion. If you are in the league, you are in the league, and you get a share of shared profits, of media money, and all these other variable ways of making money in the ecosystem around the league. And we purchased our slot in 2018 for 10.5 million euros as part of the European franchise league. In League of Legends, there's 4 main regions. It's Europe, it's North America, it's China, and it's Korea. So we were selected among over 100 applicants to have one of the spots. Those spots today are traveling, are being sold at a multiple of 2 to 3x of what they were purchased for back then. Similarly, in Counter-Strike, we have 2 spots actually, because there are 2 leagues running simultaneously and unstaggered on top of each other. That is the Esl Pro League, a company that was recently sold for $1 billion. And this Blast Pro Series, one of the companies that I personally was a part of founding, but is also building a great league, especially here in the Nordics. They are known for the very, very big and grandiose show in the Royal Arena in Copenhagen. What this allows us to do is to have security in our investments in the team and build a long-term sustainable infrastructure that can sort of underpin the financial investments that we have to make in these teams. The newest addition to our roster is Rainbow Six. It's a game that is not the size of Counter-Strike and League of Legends on a global scale, but it has a very strong foothold in North and South America. Here we have built our first offices in another part of the world. It was actually for us very much a way to test out our model. Are we able to remotely run a performance system as a club? And so far, the results have been very, very good. We acquired the club when they were at the bottom of the league, and they just played a major final in Charlotte in US, which is where all the best teams from the regions around the world are playing, making them among the 2 best teams in the world. That's been quite a step forward for us. And also there is potential franchising in the future. Again, an opportunity to purchase a spot at a price and see it rise very, very much in value. And the last game that we have under our umbrella is Fortnite. That kind of speaks to itself. If anyone on this call has a kid under 14, they will have at least heard about Fortnite. Fortnite is a little bit of a different game from an esport perspective, and it's something, because the game is so massive, we have to be in it to keep track of what's happening. But there's some really, really exciting esport developments in it, and we have some of the best players in the world there as well. Great, you can jump to the next slide. So the business side of it. What do we actually make money on, and how have we grown over the years? So when we went public, we were grossing revenue at a little bit on the early and the right around a little over 40 million Danish kroners. This year we have done 81, I think is the right amount. You can check in the papers on that. So we've seen quite a tremendous amount of growth in our business, and that is primarily built around sponsorships, classical sport business model, league revenues, which is growing quite a lot, and then a lot of new direct-to-fan plays from our side. One of them is the Astralis Nexus facility that I'm standing in right now, where you can walk in. You can not only buy Astralis merchandise, but you can also buy merchandise from a lot of our partners, including Hummel, Logitech, and a couple of other companies. So how can we continue this growth? We see a lot of opportunities in North America, among others. It's a very, very big market. It's a little bit of a harder market to penetrate, but because of the single language market and the large size of it, we see huge commercial opportunities around it, especially because the lack of borders in esport means that a Counter-Strike team from Denmark, if they're big in Counter-Strike, are also quite famous in North America. So not only have we built quite a stronghold with our Rainbow Six team, but we're also utilizing the star power of our existing teams and that seepover effect as a catalyst towards our expansion in North America. Obviously, there's always the opportunity to add new games or teams. We're being approached quite a lot by a lot of different developers, game developers to enter their leagues, but we have been quite picky with what we want to do. We want to go into things where we can see a long-term investment and you can see it makes sense from a commercial perspective. But there are definitely some interesting developments. That could be Halo, that could be Valorant, that could be different other games that we could move into in the future. And then I think the one thing that stands a little bit out when you look at the company overview is our acquisition of Pixel TV. Pixel TV is basically a way for us to reach lower down into the funnel and talk to a wider gaming audience. And our plan with that is to build it into one of the biggest gaming platforms in the Nordics by also offering localized content in Swedish, in Norwegian, and Finnish over time. And that is a plan that we're rolling out at the moment. You can jump to the next slide. Great. So just to give you a little bit more clarity around where we make our money, I've sort of put up the revenue sources 2019, 2020, 21, and 2022 expected. This also reflects the development of our ecosystem. Originally, this was an industry primarily built around two things: prize money and sponsorships. So what did you win in a tournament and what did the sponsors pay you to have a logo on a jersey? We are now at a point where we are much, much more mature and we are looking from a revenue source perspective, much more like a classical sports club. So if you look at 2019, 40% of our revenue was from prize money, league revenue, and digital items. The vast majority of that was prize money. Well, now in 2022, it's obviously a little bit smaller part of the whole cake, but primarily that part is no longer driven by prize money, but more by league revenue and digital item sales, which is also have a lot better effect on our bottom line. And that is also one of the interesting developments of the future. If anybody, and I doubt it, but if anybody was a fan and saw our Rainbow Six team play a final in the major in the weekend, you would also be met every 10 to 15 minutes by an advertisement for digital items branded with Astralis. So within that game, you can buy skins, which is for weapons, which is for operators, as they're called, the character that you actually play, wearing Astralis logos and colors, and a cut of that is being paid out to us. So we are finding new ways to monetize the system that does not exist in the physical world, but that's quite exciting and it's growing very, very fast. Furthermore, we're obviously expanding our merchandise collection. We recently prolonged and furthered our relationship with Hummel, the Danish sports provider, which is now going to do the full universe of items that you can buy on our web shop and several other places, including here in the Astralis Nexus. And then obviously we're tapping into much more of a B2B audience from an event perspective here through Nexus. And last but not least, a big part of it is still sponsorships. Sponsorships is a very sort of classical way of looking at things. I think the way that we approach it is more like a partnership where we help different companies succeed in the gaming and the esports space. That is everything from the Logitech, who is a very native company to this space, to we recently announced a partnership with Velux, who does roof light windows, which sounds quite weird for our space, but they also need to talk to a younger audience, and that is something that we're helping them with. Yeah, you can jump to the next slide. Here, I just wanted to end on giving a little bit of perspective on why are we this valuable and why are we able to sell sponsorships for these kind of amounts. That is because we have a huge global audience. The difference between Astralis and an FC Copenhagen or a Malmö is the fact that we are not tied to a physical location. When we go to China, we get sent gifts to our hotel room from Chinese fans. Astralis is not a localized thing. It's a global audience. And that's also what we can do. We can talk to a global audience through digital channels at pretty much any time. We are not set to the fact, oh, we have to do something every Sunday because that's match day. We can do pretty much anything all the time. That is also obviously one of the challenges, because if you can do everything, what are you actually going to do? But I think if you look at us and compare us to some of our competitors, even though few of them that are also publicly listed, you can easily tell that our commercial understanding and our ability to monetize this massive global audience is quite advanced. I think that was it from our side.
Great. Thank you, Jacob. We turn to some Q&A then. And I want to start off with your financial targets. You touched upon 10 to 20% sales CAGR in coming years. But what about the road to profitability? Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah, sorry. Let me present myself. I'm the CFO, Jacob Hansen. I think we've already, with our annual report, talked a little bit about how profitability is going to be and how the future is going to be. So the guidance for this year is a revenue in the range of 85 to 90 million. And actually, we, for the first time since the publicly listed in 2019, are expecting positive EBITDA. So just being able to have positive EBITDA, which is also equivalent to a positive cash flow, then we actually expect to be able to have a positive bottom line within a very short time frame as well.
All right, thank you. And in terms of the growth, how will you grow the business? Is it mainly due to increased commercial rights sales on the existing teams and existing business, or do you expect to start new teams, enter new leagues? What is the plan?
I can answer that. Obviously, we're always surveying the opportunities of expanding into new teams and new leagues. But for us, we will not do it just to do it. We will do it because it's a commercially viable opportunity. So, for example, moving into North America has allowed us to expand our existing commercial relationships with partners who are also interested in that market. I think another thing is the expansion of what we're actually offering our commercial partners. When you look at the organization from where we were in 2019 to where we are now, we are much more sophisticated, which is also why we are able to work with a partner like Velux, because we can deliver a quality and a value that makes sense in their ecosystem. But honestly, we look at sponsorships a little bit like the baseline that's going to bring us to hopefully break even, but that's not going to be something that all of a sudden grows 80% per year, right? Like, we're not going to have 200 logos on our jerseys and do all these different things. But the digital item sales, the league revenue that keeps growing, etc., that's where we're going to find the next sort of 20, 30, 40% of growth over the coming years.
All right, thank you. And a question on the competition here and competitive edge. What are the important factors for you to maintain an edge as an esport team organization? I suppose organization and brand are important factors, but and also owning franchise spots. But could you elaborate on how you maintain an edge?
Historically in esports, the only way to hold an edge and hold pretty much anything of value was competitive success. And we recognized very early on in 2019 that even though we were very good at it, and we still are, we wanted to be a part of building a system where that wasn't necessarily the only thing holding you viable. So that's why we are part of these franchise leagues, why we have been a part of helping sort of structure the way that they're built, is because we are now allowed to think a little bit longer term. So our season doesn't necessarily work in the same way as a football club. If you look at, for example, Counter-Strike, there's constantly new tournaments, there's constantly facing off different teams from around the world. And instead of just having to think about how do we do best in the next 3 weeks, we wanted to be able to think long-term and build proper structures. We did that in 2019. That resulted in probably the most successful run of any esports team in history. And now we sort of ride that wave out, and now we're restructuring and getting ready for the next one. So I think we've always been good from a performance perspective, but I also think from a brand perspective, given the fact that in a lot of other companies that are in the esports space, it is primarily only people like me. Not to say anything bad about myself, but I am an esport guy coming out of the esport world. There's not so many people as Jacob, the other Jacob, more adults in the room. So I think we've built a structure, a brand, and a way to do things that provides longevity. And that's why you also see when we announced the prolongation of the Hummel sponsorship, we're not prolonging it with 12 months. We're prolonging it with 3 to 4 years. And that gives us a base to know that all our commercial partners are going to be here for a very, very long time, allows us to make the right long-term choices when building rosters and when building brands. I hope that can answer your question.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to talk a bit about, as a final question here, about the players and the contracts. What does the contracts typically look like? How long are they? What is the typical churn, if you can call it that? And how do you maintain players?
So the churn in general in esport is usually quite high. We have kept it a lot lower than the average in esport. And I think, again, that's how you build the structure around it. But again, with the maturation of our sport, we pretty much have similar contracts to our players to what you would have if you played in the Superliga as a football player. So we are quite mature in that regards. There are some parts of the world where esports teams are not that mature. But again, we have the structure that we need, and we approach in the same way. We have nutritionists, we have sports psychologists. We have pretty much everything that we need to keep them happy. And I think, honestly, one of the things I'm quite proud of is we've seen a lot of players who were with us in the early days, who've gone somewhere else, now trying to find their way back because they understand what we have built. And that is led in our house by Kasper Witt, who is primarily probably known in Danish for being very red in the face and yelling a lot on a handball court. But he is one of the most dedicated sports performers I've ever met in my life. And he has built that culture. And we're very happy to see people wanting to be a part of it and be a part of what we've built.
Great answer. Thank you so much, Jacob and Jacob, for coming here today. And also thank you, the audience, for tuning in. That's all we have time for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.